Okay, let's start. Randy, I'll start with you, and we'll rotate the start as I did before. And I'll start with a question about balancing, the river systems that we have in this state and maintaining quality there with the needs for water that we face in the future.
Okay, an excellent question, of course, and thank you for asking that. As an engineer and as a former member of the City of Fort Collins Water Board, I want to approach this problem in a new, smart way, rather than the old way of simply just building more dams and more storage facilities and more trans-mountain diversions. And I think, as several other candidates tonight mentioned, I think as an engineer, I want to take an incremental approach to water development. And the first major big pool reservoir of low-cost water that we can develop is the huge potential for conservation. I've heard estimates of several 100,000 acre-feet of water that's available through conservation. And I think we are uniquely positioned here in northern Colorado to tap into that reservoir as well as anyone else in the state. We have an excellent high-quality water resources school right here at CSU that can help us do that. And the other part is, as an engineer, I would go to the least cost and most cost effective remedy first, and that would be conservation. After that, the more costly refurbishing and possibly expanding and cleaning out our reservoirs. And then, as a last resort, possibly new storage projects. But we have to remember that everything that we do in our river systems has an impact on the water quality. And the worst water quality that we can have is no water in the streams. And so we need to make sure that whatever we do, any new project or any new refurbishment or expansion of an existing reservoir needs to take in the environmental impacts of what we're doing here. And I pledge to have the leadership to go down to the legislature and try to make that a priority for the state.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Thank you. In the time I've been down the state legislature, water, at least the first 2 years, was a very common topic. I voted for a bill that established roundtables around the state to look at that. This is the first time we've had a mechanism to try and have people come to the table that are different stakeholders and talk about these issues on a regional basis. Clearly, we're in a bad place here on the Platte. This is the one river that a lot of places in Denver, a lot of cities are looking at to get water from. So we need to get together and work. These roundtables have just started. I think they're probably too large to accomplish a whole lot. I guess the jury's still out on what they're going to do. But I think it's important we are starting that discussion. When we hear the discussion about the other side of the mountains and this side of the mountains, that comes up all the time when we talk about water down in Denver. But I think the idea about roundtables and working together makes a lot of sense. I think trying to have one group out of Denver decide everything doesn't work with most people's desires. What I hear is they want to talk about it on a regional basis and how can they work together. I'd like to compliment the City of Fort Collins and Northern Conservancy. This year, when we were short of water in this area, they came to bat and tried to help some of the farmers out in the East Plains that needed water, the people who were pumping. And unfortunately, the town of Boulder and Sterling decided that they didn't want to agree with that. But I respect that they stepped up and tried to help them in a year that originally looked like we were going to be very good, but we weren't. And with April, things went downhill, and you can see the shortage we've had ever since. The people augmenting over in the East Plains are a problem. I think we need more storage. We need to do it properly. I think we can do that and work together across the state to use the water more wisely.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Mark. Well, if you, I encourage you on the way out to pick up my 8-point plan on that links clean environment, good jobs, and energy independence, because the fourth bullet point reads as follows: addressing Colorado's water realities through serious conservation strategies and cost-effective water storage and efficiency projects. I think that's at the crux of what needs to be done in Colorado. It's a very complicated issue, but I think we need to have a balance between water storage capacity that's cost-effective and efficient, as well as much more serious conservation efforts. I think another thing that needs to be considered here is the reality of global climate change. Isn't it interesting that the Colorado Ski Industry USA is realizing how important the issue of global climate change is to their industry, and therefore they are taking the initiative, providing leadership as far as using more reliance on renewable energy in order to offset some of the problems associated with fossil fuel types of energy. So I think that is fundamental. We must consider the implications of global climate change and how that affects snowpack and so on. Referendum A, which was something that was before the voters, I believe, in 2000. I opposed Referendum A. I believe that that was a boondoggle type of thing that would have allowed for bonding to create all manner of large capacity dams and reservoirs around the state. And I do support increasing water capacity, but that was not the proper way to do it. Finally, there have been particular pieces of legislation in the last 2 sessions. And I think that there is good legislation that can help us come to solutions on some of these issues. And I appreciate the fact that my opponent, Bob, supported legislation to create these regional roundtables. But there are some other bills that came up in the 06 and 05 session, in particular, one that would have allowed water court judges to help address issues around trans-basin water diversion issues. And he voted no against that bill, and I would have voted yes. Secondly, the other bill is the issue of mitigating damages when you're moving water from one basin to another. I would have voted yes. My opponent voted no. So there are differences here. Thank you.
And the federal government's very involved in this, in all water issues in Colorado. Eric, some thoughts that you might
Yeah, thanks. I came to Colorado 31 years ago to the Larimer Regional Council of Governments to help resolve conflict between federal water quality law and state water law. So I've been involved in this issue a long time, and as a congressman I have to take a geopolitical look. And the last great water storage project that was actually denied by the EPA was the Two Forks project. It was a 1.1 million acre foot project. I would have approved that project if I had still been in office, and the reason for it is that it created the conditions for fragmented public utilities along the Front Range, which creates more conditions for urban sprawl, and it took water away from agriculture at the end, which further created conditions for urban sprawl. We can't let that happen, and one of the reasons it failed is because the Colorado congressional delegation wasn't unified behind it with the governor's office. I'll propose legislation that will start the process to return 21 cents of every dollar that we send to Washington that doesn't come back to us. Similar statistic that Don mentioned earlier on transportation funding within the state. That amounts to billions of dollars over the years. We need more storage. It's a practical matter. We have 300 to 400,000 acre feet going out of the South Platte to Nebraska, Kansas, is almost the same going out the Colorado River, to which we're entitled to under our various interstate compacts. And we should store that water, because if we don't, we have a 52% increase in the demand from urban uses in the next 20 years. And that water will come right off of irrigated agriculture. It'll knock about another 500,000 irrigated agricultural land out of production. So water storage is really the issue for the federal government. We should go back and get the money. It's an equity issue. We're entitled to that money. It shouldn't go to other states. It should come back to Colorado for water storage and transportation. Thank you.
Higher education, we have a lot of students here in the room tonight who have joined us, and the question has come up about support for higher education, monetary support for higher education. How do you feel about that? And also taking a look at the role higher education plays in the Colorado economy and maybe could play in the future in improving our economy. Bob, can you start this time?
Certainly. Thank you, Mark. It's a good question. I was very outspoken on supporting Referendum C in the last election. I worked on my own time, not paid for it, worked on my own time, talking to different groups, trying to support Referendum C, because I think higher education is one of our infrastructure pieces, like transportation, the state should be paying for. Realize, too, that during the time with C, we'll be in a little better shape for a while without the ratchet down effect. But as soon as that goes out and runs out, once the economy goes down, the first department that'll get cuts in the next go-around will be higher education. I think we need to look at another go-around, have vision, and look towards the future, and say, how will we fund transportation and education on a reasonable basis, whether it's through a rainy day fund or through a different funding mechanism, but realize with the K through 12 element and the Medicaid, the first two in line with the state budget, that we cannot cut. Higher ed is the next one, the next biggest department. That's why it's always cut when we have a downturn. I think it's a very important part of the state. It's part of our infrastructure. We need to change how we fund higher education and do a better job.
Thank you. John?
Well, as one who has my younger son being at Colorado State University, I know that the challenges and opportunities that are there for trying to help your kid get through college. And I know, for example, that tuition costs have risen and financial aid, whether it's needs-based financial aid or scholarships based on academic ability or so forth, have not kept up. The rates of student loans, these are federal government policies. I hope you can work on this, Eric. Federal government policies that have increased the interest rates on student loans. I think these are things that need to change in order to make higher education more accessible to students who want to better themselves. I also think that on the matter of Referendum C, not only did I support Referendum C and work very actively on it, yes, I did work on it on my own time, but I put in a lot of overtime. And I was basically out in the trenches helping with get out the vote, back down in the Denver metro area, helping people to understand the implications and the value of why it was in Colorado's best interest, why it was in students' best interest to pass Referendum C so that there would be more funding available to invest in our infrastructure. And our infrastructure includes a number of things, and education is one of those most important things. I think that one of the things that I would work very hard on is to make sure that the Referendum C dollars that are in the pipeline, that we make sure that more of that goes for higher education. Not only Colorado State University, but Front Range Community College. That's an integral part of our post-secondary educational system and very important to allow for opportunities for all students to better themselves. And I would look for increases in the College Opportunity Fund in order to keep up with the rising cost of tuition. And finally, it's a proven fact that when we support higher education like CSU, like Front Range Community College, that it's an economic driver. It's good for the economy. For every buck that we invest at CSU, we get about $8 or $9 in economic activity, and that to me is a good deal. Thank you.